Hi YouTube, in this video I'll be teaching you my best tips to excel in Trinket meta. Trinkets are a new mechanic in Hearthstone Battlegrounds where you spend gold turns 6 and 9 to give you a beneficial effect for the rest of the game, and there are many hidden rules on how these trinkets are offered that I bet you didn't know about. Watch till end because these tips will help you climb infinite in Trinket meta. Let's start with our first tip, learning how to tutor trinkets. There are some pretty simple rules when it comes to which trinkets you're able to get offered. Trinkets fall into 3 categories: neutral trinkets, pivot trinkets, and tribal trinkets. All the neutral trinkets such as Goldenizer or souvenir stand, you're always going to be able to get. There are trinkets that give you a neutral effect and don't really synergize with the tribes, they'll just help your game in general. For example, whatever comp you play, you're always going to be able to use Goldenizer or Goblin Wallet. And then there's pivot trinkets. Some trinkets are labeled as pivot trinkets and you'll also always be able to be offered them. These trinkets are sometimes offered at a discount because the game wants you to try to pivot into them. Like if you have a board full of undead and you get offered a TomTom portrait, it'll cost 2 less to compensate for the fact that you don't have any automatons on your board. Fellblood Portrait is another example of a pivot trinket as it will always be activated in a demon and or elemental lobby. And finally, there are tribal trinkets. Every tribal trinket has one or more tribe associated with them, and they will be activated only if you have 2 or more of the tribes on your board or in your hand. For example, Nurglish Phrasebook has the Murloc tag, so you can only get offered Nurglish Phrasebook with 2 or more Murlocs. Similarly, you can only get offered Lucky Tabby with 2 Beasts, Rusty Trident with 2 Nagas, you get the idea. There are also 2 trinkets with the Tribeless tag, Eye of Dalaran and Ironforge Anvil, and these will only be activated when you have 2 or more neutral units. Finally, one last rule. If you're playing a tribal hero such as Patches or Flurgle, you'll always be able to get the respective tribal trinket despite not having 2 of the tribes on your board. Patches will always be able to get pirate trinkets, and Flurgle will always be able to get Murloc trinkets. Now let's get into how to best take advantage of these rules. For your lesser trinket, I would say don't think about activating tribal trinkets too much. All the neutral trinkets are good enough to the point where you're usually able to pick one good neutral trinket, level normally, and find a comp. You definitely do not need a good tribal trinket as your lesser trinket. Greater trinkets are a different story. There's plenty of instances where you're committed to a comp prior to your greater trinket turn. Maybe you're playing Start of Combat Dragon, Death Rattle Pirates, or Ursul Demons, and you really want to make sure you get a good trinket. Well, I'll tell you straight up, you're never going to be guaranteed to get the best trinket ever, but you can make sure you get something pickable. If you're committed to a comp, make sure that no other tribe is activated, which means that you have 1 or fewer of every other tribe on your board. You really don't want to be full committed dragons and get offered 3 Naga trinkets just because you kept a shell collector pair on your board. Yes, that has happened to me before. And if you don't want that to happen in your game also, just go ahead and sell that shell collector pair so you won't be able to get those trashy Naga trinkets anymore. In conclusion, tutoring trinkets is less about targeting a specific trinket and more about making it so that all of the trash trinkets from other tribes are out of your pool. My second tip is to only pick a directional trinket if you've enabled it. Let me stress how important this is. Take this very realistic scenario where on turn 6 you get the pivot trinket Fellblood Portrait offered. It's even a demon lobby, which makes this one of the best trinkets in the game, right? Well, it depends if you've enabled it. What's your reason to pick Fellblood Portrait? Do you already have a false implicator either on board or in shop? Do you have a fiery Fellblood either on board or in shop? If yes, then it's one of the best trinkets in the game and you should go for it. If not, then it's really not worth picking. Sure, sometimes you pick it and immediately roll into fiery Fellblood and it feels great because you can scale your shop every single turn. But I'll tell you, most of the times you pick it, you force demons, don't roll into exactly what you need and die. And for the sake of climbing, this is not a viable strategy. Same thing with any tribal trinket really. You can't pick a tribal trinket and then force the direction. You need to already have the direction enabled in order to pick the trinket. Here's another example, a TomTom portrait. What are some common enablers? Perhaps you're Akka Zamorak, Terran, or Lich King, and you can immediately start scaling the TomTom with your hero power. Or maybe you already had an TomTom pair on your board and it's a pretty big power spike. But with none of that, it's a really bad trinket and you're forcing a TomTom comp for no reason, so you're better off just picking a neutral trinket and playing normally. This tip is very important, so let's just do some more examples. Think about what would you need to enable to pick up Eternal Night portrait. This one is pretty simple. You need to already have Eternal Night on board for this to be remotely pickable. Don't pick it and then start scaling Eternal Night, that's too slow. What about Hoggy Bank? Think about it for a second. The answer is Hoggy Bank is enabled by gem scaling through either Jazzer or Piper. So even if you have all Quillbers on your board, you can only pick this one with your gem scaled. Don't pick it and then roll for gem scaling. Tip number 3. Pick greedy trinkets when you're stable and tempo trinkets when you're not. Goblin Wallet is one of the best trinkets in the game. That is, only if you know you're going to survive a long time. It's a pretty greedy trinket that has immense payout when it starts getting to those later turns. But if you're already in a rough spot, losing fights and taking a ton of damage, you should maybe pick a trinket that will help you immediately. Maybe you take Glowing Gauntlet and buy some Divine Shield units, or Aeronassal Urn, which instantly stabilizes you so you can easily level. And this tip especially applies to greater trinkets. By turn 9, you should probably have figured out already whether your spot is good enough to win the game. And if you're in a very sketchy situation with low HP, you will not be able to take a scaling trinket that wins you the game. Instead, take trinkets that provide immediate impact and try to live the next few fights. If you thought Feral Talisman or Windrunner's Necklace were bad trinkets, next time you have an Undead or Beast setup, try them because I guarantee they will save so much HP. Those are all the tips I have, so let's just end the video off with an interactive example from a recent Rarran game that I had, and I'll explain every single trinket selection thoroughly. On turn 5, I had a Scalawag pair and also 2 demons on my board, which explains why I got offered Compass Pirates and Fellblood Portrait, a pirate and a demon trinket. Compass Pirates is actually in general not that good of a trinket. With Compass, you're going to want elementals, pirates, or demons, and the reasoning is because these are the tribes where you're going to want to cycle cards from that tribe. Elementals benefit from cycling elementals with Wraith and Rock. Murlocs benefit from cycling Murlocs with Bream Counter and Merglin Burglar, and demons benefit from cycling demons with Urzel. Quillbors can also benefit from cycling Quillbors with Prophet of the board. Any other tribe doesn't really benefit from cycling, so Compass Pirates doesn't excite me too much. Fellblood Portrait also cannot be the pick because I just haven't enabled it. I don't have a Fiery Fellblood or any way to take advantage of the buff shop currently. And finally, Goldenizer and Token are both valid options. They're really never going to be bad. I think after the buff, Token is slightly overtuned, which is why I went for that trinket. Turn 6, I suddenly have a Rylak on my board thanks to the Token, and my trinket selection consists of 3 neutral trinkets and Fellblood Portrait. Remember how last turn I couldn't pick Fellblood Portrait because I never enabled it? Well, suddenly I do have it enabled. The Rylak makes it so that I can pick the Fellblood Portrait and scale my shop every turn, which is exactly what I went for. However, without the Rylak, I still wouldn't have a reason to pick the Fellblood Portrait, and I would probably have to go for another neutral trinket. And finally, the Greater Trinket. You can see I got the Beast Trinket Gilnean Thorn Rose despite obviously not playing Beast, but that was unavoidable because I needed to keep Macaw Rylak to scale the shop, so the game just activated the Beast Trinkets. Because I'm obviously not playing Beast, we can just ignore that trinket, but at least we have 3 other options to look at. Glowing Gauntlet seems interesting on paper, but then you realize my shop is already buffed +20/+20 and growing, so an extra 8/8 isn't going to be nearly as impactful as just finding more cards that benefit from consuming the shop. Glowing Gauntlet is good in a situation where you have the shop consume setup already, but your shop just isn't quite big enough. Peaspoon Candle is in general a mediocre neutral trinket that I usually pick if I have no better option. And finally, Peggle is a great way to close out the game when you're already stable. But be careful, Peggle isn't always good, okay? Some 7 drops are mostly worthless, such as Papa Bear, Recurring Nightmare, and Obsidian Ravager. But without these 3 tribes, getting a 7 every turn is so powerful. Just make sure to keep in mind tip number 3, as it's a very greedy trinket, so you want to make sure that you're pretty stable before you pick it. That'll be it for this video. Let me know if you like the explained examples in this guide. Feedback is always appreciated. I'm trying to pump out a guide every single week, so subscribe so you don't miss them. See ya.